Professor Vexithara had built her reputation on certainty. 3 decades of xenobiological research, 200 published papers, and a tenure position at the galaxy's most prestigious academy had taught her that the universe, for all its chaos, followed predictable rules. Life emerged in predictable environments. Sentience developed under predictable pressures. Deathworlds remained appropriately, reassuringly dead. Which made her Tuesday morning lecture on theoretical impossibilities in planetary habitability particularly satisfying to deliver. "Observe Sol 3, she announced to the packed auditorium, her 4 arms gesturing gracefully toward the holographic projection rotating above the lecture pit. A textbook example of what we term a cascade failure biosphere. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story." 200 alien students from 47 species dutifully activated their recording devices. The planet hung in simulated space like an accusation. Swirls of white cloud cover concealing what every respectable xenobiologist knew to be a hellscape of impossible contradictions. "Note the atmospheric composition," Vexithara continued, her gill slits fluttering with academic satisfaction. 21% oxygen. This alone should tell you everything you need to know about this world's hostility to complex life. A crystalline student in the 3rd row raised a sharp appendage. "Professor, my species requires 14% oxygen minimum for cognitive function. Wouldn't higher concentrations be beneficial?" "Excellent question, shard of morning light." Vexithara's mandibles clicked approvingly. "What you're observing is a classic misconception. Oxygen becomes highly toxic at concentrations above 15%. At 21%, any hypothetical organism would experience cellular oxidation so severe that tissue death would occur within hours. The atmosphere itself is poison." She gestured again, and the hologram zoomed toward the planet's surface. But the atmospheric toxicity is merely the beginning of this world's hostilities. Observe the gravitational constant, 9.8 meters per second squared. For comparison, our own civilized worlds maintain gravitational fields between 6.2 and 7.4. This crushing force would compress any delicate neural tissue, making consciousness impossible. The projection shifted to display temperature readings. Surface temperatures fluctuate wildly between 183 and 331 Kelvin across different latitudes and seasons. No stable ecosystem could develop under such thermal chaos. Most critically, vast portions of the surface are covered in dihydrogen monoxide, a solvent so aggressive it dissolves organic compounds on contact. A methane-breathing student in the back row bubbled a question through his translation unit. "Professor, don't some extramophil bacteria survive in water?" "Bacterial survival and complex life development are entirely different phenomena," Vexithara replied smoothly. "We're discussing the theoretical evolution of sentience, not simple chemical processes. The electromagnetic bombardment from Sol 3's parent star would prevent any meaningful genetic stability. The planet receives roughly 1,368 watts per square meter of unfiltered radiation." She paused for effect, savoring the moment before delivering her favorite part of this particular lecture. But perhaps most definitively, Sol 3 experiences what we call seismic instability syndrome. The planet's crust shifts constantly due to internal thermal activity. Massive tectonic events regularly resurface entire continents. Volcanic activity releases clouds of sulfur compounds that would suffocate any respiratory system. Electromagnetic storms in the upper atmosphere would fry any neural network sophisticated enough to support consciousness. The hologram now displayed a cross-section of the planet's interior, revealing the molten core that drove the surface chaos. In summary, Sol 3 represents a perfect storm of uninhabitable conditions. It serves as an excellent case study in why certain stellar systems remain empty of intelligent life, despite being theoretically within what primitive calculations once called habitable zones. Vexthara began gathering her notes, preparing to transition to the next slide, a comparison with the properly civilized worlds that had produced the galaxy's thriving species. The lecture was proceeding exactly as it had for the past 15 semesters, with the same satisfying murmurs of understanding from her students, which made the small, clear voice from the back of the auditorium particularly unexpected. "Excuse me, Professor." Vexithera's 4 eyes focused on the source, a figure in the standard issue Academy jumpsuit, seated in the furthest row where the lighting was dimmer. The student appeared to be from one of the newer species, though the professor couldn't immediately identify the physiological markers. "Yes." Vexithara's voice carried just enough edge to discourage lengthy interruptions. "I'm sorry, but I think there might be an error in your data." The auditorium fell silent with the particular hush that accompanies academic challenges. Students shifted uncomfortably, recording devices swiveled toward the unexpected dissenter, and Vexthara felt her gill slits tighten with irritation. "I assure you, Cadet, that my research has been peer-reviewed across multiple institutions. Perhaps you could clarify which specific data point you're questioning." The figure stood shorter than most species represented in the auditorium, with an oddly symmetrical bipedal form and what appeared to be external sensory organs clustered around a central facial structure. "Well, you said no cadet could survive Sol 3, but I'm from Sol 3. The silence stretched longer now, taking on a different quality entirely. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" Vexithara's voice had lost its professorial authority, replaced by something approaching bewilderment. "I said I'm from Sol 3. Earth. Terra. Whatever designation you're using in your files." The student's tone remained conversational, almost apologetic. "I mean, I've been sitting here for 43 minutes listening to you describe my home planet as uninhabitable, which seems like it might be worth mentioning." "That's impossible." Vexthara's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation that her students had never witnessed. "Sol 3 is classified as uninhabitable. Our atmospheric analysis clearly shows—" "Oh, the 21% oxygen thing." The human, because that's what she had to be, though Vexthara's mind was having difficulty accepting the classification, waved a hand dismissively. "Yeah, that's normal for us. Actually pretty refreshing compared to some of the underground facilities I've worked in." One of the crystalline students began a rapid tapping sound that indicated distress. A methane breather's translation unit emitted what could only be described as confused static. In the middle rows, several silicon-based life forms had gone completely motionless, their species equivalent of shock. "The gravitational force," Vexithara said desperately, grasping for solid ground in what had become a surreal conversation. "The 9.8 meters per second squared would crush your neural tissue." "I mean, it's definitely heavier than the moon, but we manage." The human seemed genuinely puzzled by the concern. "Though I guess that explains why I've been feeling so light since I got to the station. Your artificial gravity is really comfortable." "The dihydrogen monoxide," Vexithara whispered, her voice barely audible through the auditorium's acoustics. "Water? Professor, are you feeling all right? We're like 60% water. I literally drank a glass of it with breakfast this morning." The auditorium erupted. Students began chattering in 17 different languages, translation units overloaded with simultaneous conversations, and somewhere in the chaos, Vexithara heard the distinctive sound of a gaseous form student experiencing what could only be described as an existential crisis. "This is unprecedented," Vexithara muttered, more to herself than to the room. "Our classifications, our models, our entire understanding of habitability parameters." The human raised her hand again, cutting through the noise with surprising efficiency. "If it helps, Professor, I have my Academy medical clearance files with me. Complete biometric analysis, environmental tolerance tests, the whole standard package. I mean, I had to get cleared to attend classes here just like everyone else." Vexthara stared at the impossibility standing calmly in her lecture hall. 30 years of research, 200 publications, an entire career built on the fundamental assumption that she understood how life worked in the universe. "Class dismissed," she announced weakly. As students filed out in confused clusters, still chattering about the unprecedented disruption to Professor Vexithara's legendary certainty, the human remained seated. She appeared to be reviewing notes on a standard Academy datapad, completely unbothered by the academic earthquake she had just triggered. "Cadet," Vexithara called out as the auditorium emptied. "What did you say your name was?" "I didn't, actually. But it's Cadet Chen, exchange program from the Sol system. And you're really from Earth." "Born and raised in the Tibetan highlands, about 4,200 meters above sea level, if that helps with your atmospheric pressure calculations." Vexithara felt something she hadn't experienced since her graduate studies. The vertigo-inducing sensation of discovering that everything she thought she knew was fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. Dr. Helix Andros had performed approximately 12,000 biometric evaluations during his tenure as Chief Medical Officer at Kepler Station. He prided himself on clinical precision, diagnostic accuracy, and an unflappable bedside manner that had earned him respect across 47 different physiologies, none of which prepared him for the conversation currently taking place in Medical Bay 7. "You want to do what now?" Cadet Chen sat on the examination table with her legs dangling over the edge, a posture that would have indicated severe spinal injury in most species, but which she seemed to find comfortable. "Standard survivability assessment," Professor Vexthara repeated, though her voice lacked its usual academic confidence. "If you're genuinely from Sol 3, then surely you won't object to proving your biological parameters match your claims." Dr. Helix Andros tentacled through his diagnostic checklist, hoping to find some procedural ground rules that might apply to whatever this situation had become. "I should mention that our atmospheric compatibility tests can be quite rigorous. We'll need to cycle through various gas mixtures, pressure differentials, temperature extremes." "That sounds fine," Chen interrupted, "though I should probably mention that I've been breathing your station atmosphere for 3 months without any issues. Feels a little thin, actually." The medical scanner in Helix Andros's primary appendage began emitting a confused warbling sound. "Thin? Our atmospheric mixture is calibrated for optimal comfort across all known respiratory systems. The oxygen concentration is precisely 12%. "Right. That's what I mean. Back home we run about 21%. Took me a few weeks to adjust when I first arrived." Vexithara's mandibles clicked frantically. "Doctor, please begin with the atmospheric tolerance baseline. I need empirical data." The first test chamber resembled a transparent coffin, which Chen noted with mild interest but no apparent concern. As the atmospheric processors hummed to life, Helix Andros began cycling through increasingly hostile gas mixtures while monitoring his patient's vital signs. 15% oxygen, he announced. Chen's readings remained steady. 18%. Still normal. 20%. This is approaching theoretical toxicity levels for most species. "Could you bump it up a little more?" Chen asked through the communication system. "This is starting to feel like home." At 21% oxygen, something unprecedented happened. Chen's biological markers actually improved. Her cellular efficiency increased, neural activity sharpened, and muscle tone enhanced. "This is medically impossible," Dr. Helixandros whispered. Nurse Quantum Flutter, who had been observing from the monitoring station, began what could only be described as nervous chittering. "Doctor, should I contact the xenobiology department? These readings don't match any known parameters." "Let's try the pressure differential test," Vexithara suggested desperately. The chamber's atmospheric pressure began climbing steadily. Most species experienced cognitive impairment at 1.2 standard atmospheres. At 1.5, cellular damage became inevitable. At 2.0 atmospheres, even the most robust physiology would begin to fail. Chen stretched her arms above her head and yawned. "How are you feeling, Cadet?" Dr. Helixandros asked, his voice tight with professional bewilderment. "Pretty good. Actually, this reminds me of diving back home. I used to free dive to about 30 meters in the Pacific. The pressure down there is roughly 4 times surface normal." 4 times? Nurse Quantum Flutter's chittering intensified to near-panic levels. "Sure, though that's nothing compared to some of the deep-sea exploration crews. They work at pressures that would crush most equipment." Dr. Helixandros glanced at Professor Vexithara, who appeared to be questioning her entire understanding of physics. "Perhaps we should try the temperature variance assessment." The thermal regulation system engaged, dropping the chamber temperature to near-freezing levels that would induce hibernation states in cold-adapted species and immediate cellular shutdown in warm climate organisms. Chen pulled her academy jumpsuit tighter around her shoulders. "Bit chilly. Reminds me of winter in Minnesota." "Minnesota?" Vexthera asked weakly. "It's a region on Earth where the temperature regularly drops to -40 degrees Celsius. People live there year-round. They have hockey tournaments on frozen lakes." The medical bay fell silent except for the persistent, alarming sounds of diagnostic equipment encountering readings it had never been programmed to interpret. "Let's try the radiation exposure protocol," Dr. Helixandros suggested, though his tone suggested a man grasping for explanations that might restore his understanding of biology. The chamber began flooding with electromagnetic radiation at levels that would sterilize most known pathogens and cause immediate genetic damage to any complex organism. Chen examined her fingernails with apparent interest. "You know, this is actually less radiation than you get from a standard medical X-ray back home, or flying in aircraft above the atmosphere. Airline pilots get pretty significant radiation exposure over their careers." "They what?" 3 voices said simultaneously. "Oh yeah, cosmic radiation, solar particles, electromagnetic storms. Space is pretty radioactive. I always figured that was common knowledge." Dr. Helixandros looked at his diagnostic readings, then at the calm human sitting in his testing chamber, then at the readings again. "Cadet Chen, according to these instruments, the radiation levels in that chamber should have sterilized your DNA structure approximately 6 minutes ago." "Huh. Maybe your sensors need recalibration?" Professor Vexithara had begun pacing in small circles, a behavior that in her species indicated severe cognitive stress. "Doctor, what about the pH tolerance assessment?" "I'm not sure that's advisable. I need data," Vexthera interrupted. "Empirical, verifiable data. The chamber's chemical systems engaged, introducing acidic compounds that would dissolve the external membranes of most life forms. This smells like the hot springs near Yellowstone," Chen observed conversationally. "We used to go camping there when I was a kid. Some of the geothermal pools are so acidic they'd dissolve metal, but they're beautiful to look at." "You went camping near acid pools?" Nurse Quantum Flutter asked in horror. "Sure, great hiking, though you had to watch out for the grizzly bears." "The what bears?" "Grizzly bears." Big predatory mammals, about 350 kilograms, equipped with claws and teeth designed for hunting large prey. They roam freely through the same areas where humans go for recreational activities. Dr. Alexandros felt his medical training abandoning him entirely. You recreate in environments populated by large predators? Well, you have to be smart about it. Make noise so you don't surprise them, store food properly, know how to react if you encounter one. Basic wilderness safety. Basic wilderness safety, Vexithara repeated hollowly. Though honestly, the bears aren't as dangerous as some people think. Now, saltwater crocodiles, those are genuinely scary. 20-foot ambush predators that can snap a person in half. But millions of people live in areas where they're common. The medical bay had taken on the atmosphere of a disaster response center, with staff members hurrying between monitoring stations and speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "Doctor," Nurse Quantum Flutter called out, "I'm reading some unusual thermal signatures from the test subject." "Unusual how?" "She appears to be generating internal heat to maintain her core temperature despite the environmental conditions." Chen nodded helpfully. "Homeothermic regulation. Most mammals have it. Our bodies maintain constant internal temperature regardless of external conditions, within reasonable limits." "Reasonable limits?" Dr. Alexandros asked faintly. "Oh, you know. Anywhere from about -40 to +60 Celsius. Outside that range gets uncomfortable pretty quickly." Professor Vexithara stopped pacing and stared directly at the human in the test chamber. "Cadet Chen, I need you to understand something. Every single parameter we've just tested represents lethal environmental conditions for every known species in the Galactic database. That seems like a pretty significant oversight in the database. We have comprehensive biological surveys from 847 inhabited worlds. 848 now, I guess." Dr. Alexandros cleared his throat. "Professor, I think we need to contact the Academy administrators. These test results will require immediate review by the Xenobiology Council." "And probably the Military Assessment Division," Nurse Quantum Flutter added quietly. Chen looked up with mild interest. "Why the military?" The three aliens exchanged glances, heavy with implications that the human couldn't quite decipher. "No reason," Vexithara said quickly. "Just standard procedure for unprecedented biological discoveries." Archivist 0.7 had spent the better part of 3 centuries organizing the galaxy's most comprehensive database of inhabited systems. Her species possessed perfect recall and an obsessive attention to detail that made them ideal for bureaucratic positions requiring absolute accuracy. She had never, in 247 years of service, encountered a filing error, which made the current situation particularly disturbing. "Run the search parameters again," she instructed her assistant, a nervous energy being named Flux, who had been recruited specifically for his to process information at quantum speeds. "Sol system, 3rd planetary body, classification search complete," Flux reported, his luminous form flickering with computational stress. "Results: uninhabited, hostile environment, no sentient life detected. Survey status: avoided due to extreme conditions. And you're certain there are no secondary files? No updated surveys? No communication logs?" "Cross-referencing complete. Sol 3 appears in our database exactly 17 times, all referencing it as a cautionary example of uninhabitable worlds." 0.7's manipulator appendages tapped against her workstation in patterns that would have driven most organic species to madness, but which helped her process complex information. The message from Medical Bay 7 had been clear. Immediate verification required regarding inhabited status of Sol system. Flux, access the Galactic communication network. Attempt direct contact with Sol 3. Archivist, Our protocols specifically prohibit contact attempts with dead systems. The energy expenditure alone. Override the protocols. Administrative Priority 7. Flux's form shifted through several spectrum frequencies before settling into a reluctant blue-green glow. Transmission initiated. Standard first contact protocols. Wait. The pause stretched long enough that 0.7 began to wonder if her assistant had experienced a critical error. Flux? Archivist, I'm receiving a response. Multiple responses. Sol 3 appears to have extensive communication infrastructure. That's impossible. Dead worlds don't maintain... Sol 3 responding to communication request. A new voice interrupted through the chamber's audio systems. The translation matrix struggled with the alien phonemes before settling into comprehensible speech. This is Houston Ground Control. Please identify your transmission source and purpose. 0.7 stared at her communication console as if it had begun speaking in ancient poetry. Houston Ground Control? Affirmative. You're broadcasting on outdated frequencies, by the way. Most interplanetary traffic uses the updated protocols established by the Sol Trade Consortium. Sol Trade Consortium? 0.7's voice had risen to frequencies that indicated severe information processing strain. Independent commercial organization based out of Luna City, with secondary facilities on Mars and the Europa mining stations. Are you having difficulty with your translation matrix? Flux had begun cycling through colors that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrums, a sure sign of cognitive overload. Archivist, I'm detecting multiple artificial structures in orbit around Sol 3. Stations, vessels, what appears to be a significant industrial complex on the fourth planet. You said Europa mining stations? 0.7 asked the communication channel. One of Jupiter's moons. The ice mining operations there supply most of the outer system colonies, though the asteroid belt facilities are more profitable for rare metals. Colonies? Sure. Titan, Enceladus, the Martian terraforming project, various asteroid habitats. Nothing too exotic, though the research station near Proxima Centauri is pretty cutting edge. 0.7 felt the peculiar sensation that her species experienced when encountering information that contradicted fundamental assumptions about reality. How many humans currently exist in the Sol system? About 15 billion, give or take, though that doesn't count the various deep space exploration missions or the generation ships heading toward other systems. 15 billion, 0.7 repeated numbly. The census gets tricky when you factor in the Mars colonies and the asteroid belt communities. Different jurisdictions, different reporting standards. Flux had begun emitting a high-frequency whine that suggested his processing capabilities were approaching critical limits. Archivist, our stellar cartography indicates Sol system has been classified as a void for survey purposes for approximately 400 standard years. Well, that explains why nobody stopped by, the Houston voice said, with what the translation matrix interpreted as amusement. We were starting to think we were alone out here. You weren't expecting contact? Oh, we've been trying to establish communication with other civilizations for decades. We've got radio telescopes, deep space monitoring stations, interstellar probes. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence program has been active for over a century. 0.7 felt her worldview restructuring in ways that would require extensive therapy to process. You've been trying to contact us? Not you specifically, but anyone out there. We figured the galaxy was probably pretty crowded, but our signals never got responses. Started to think maybe intelligent life was rarer than we hoped. Your signals? Flux managed to query between processing episodes. Radio transmissions, mostly, though we've been experimenting with quantum entanglement communication. The Mars Research Facility claims they've achieved instantaneous data transfer across interplanetary distances. 0.7 accessed her historical files with growing horror. Flux, search our communication logs for unidentified signal sources from the Sol region. Processing. Archivist, I'm finding approximately 47,000 intercepted transmissions from Sol, 3 over the past 150 standard years. Where were they classified? Random cosmic noise, background radiation, dismissed as natural phenomena. The Houston voice continued cheerfully. We've been broadcasting pretty consistently. Television signals, radio, digital data streams, though most of our recent stuff is probably encrypted. Television signals? 0.7 asked weakly. Entertainment broadcasts mostly, news programs, educational content, cultural material. We figured if anyone out there was listening, they might want to know what we're about. Cultural material? Music, stories, historical documentaries, art, philosophy, science. You know, civilization stuff. Flux's form had stabilized into a deep crimson that indicated he was accessing archived data at maximum processing speed. Archivist, I'm reviewing the intercepted transmissions. Sol 3 has been broadcasting detailed information about their society, their technology, their biology, and their history for over a century. And we classified it as cosmic noise, 0.7 said, in the tone her species used for contemplating existential disasters. Seems like a pretty significant filing error, the Houston voice observed. How did you know to respond to our transmission? 0.7 asked, grasping for some explanation that might restore her understanding of proper archival procedures. Your signal showed up on our deep space monitoring network. We've got installations throughout the system specifically designed to detect interstellar communications. When your transmission came through, it was the first clearly artificial signal we'd ever received from outside the Sol system. And you just answered? Well, yeah. First contact with an alien civilization is kind of a big deal. We've got entire government departments dedicated to figuring out how to handle this scenario. Flux had begun emitting patterns that indicated he was cross-referencing multiple databases simultaneously. Archivist, I'm detecting some concerning information in their transmissions. More concerning than a populated system we've been ignoring for 4 centuries? Sol 3 appears to have developed faster-than-light travel capabilities. The communication channel crackled. Oh, you picked up on the Alcubierre drive tests? We weren't sure if the spatial distortions would be detectable at interstellar distances. You have faster-than-light travel? 0.7's voice had reached frequencies that most translation matrices couldn't process. Experimental stages, mostly. We've managed some small-scale tests, nothing practical yet for interstellar distances, though the theoretical framework suggests we should be able to reach nearby systems within a few decades. Nearby systems? Proxima Centauri, Alpha Centauri, Wolf 359. We've already got some unmanned probes heading that direction using conventional propulsion. 0.7 began calculating the implications of a species with FTL capabilities that the galaxy had completely overlooked. What kind of defensive capabilities does your species possess? Defensive? Well, we've got some pretty sophisticated military technology, but it's mostly designed for conflicts within our own system. Why, are we likely to encounter hostile species out there? That remains to be determined, 0.7 said carefully. What constitutes sophisticated military technology in your estimation? Nuclear deterrence, orbital defense platforms, kinetic bombardment systems, the usual stuff for protecting planetary populations and space infrastructure. Flux's form had begun cycling through a range of colors that indicated severe computational stress. Archivist, their casual description of usual military capabilities exceeds the defensive systems of most civilized worlds. Is that good or bad? The Houston voice asked, with what seemed like genuine curiosity. 0.7 stared at her communication console, then at her assistant, who was experiencing what appeared to be a chromatic seizure, then at the files that had just redefined her understanding of galactic civilization. "I think," she said slowly, "we need to contact the Emergency Council." "Emergency Council?" Houston asked. "It's nothing to worry about," 0.7 lied smoothly. "Just standard first contact procedures." "Great. Should we prepare some kind of diplomatic reception? We've got protocols for this sort of thing." "Please don't do anything dramatic until we contact you again." "No problem. This is pretty exciting for us. Should we notify the other human colonies, or keep this quiet for now?" "Other colonies?" "The generation ships. We've got about 6 vessels with permanent populations heading toward various star systems. Slower than light travel, but they'll reach their destinations within the next century or two." 0.7 disconnected the communication channel and sat in silence for several long minutes. "Flux," she said finally. "Yes. Archivist? How quickly can you contact the Military Assessment Division?" The emergency session of the Galactic Academic Council had been called exactly 7 times in the past millennium. Previous emergencies included the discovery of sentient gas clouds in the Vega system, the revelation that certain crystalline entities could achieve collective consciousness, and the unfortunate incident involving the time-dilating effects of the Rigel artifact. None of those crises had prepared the Council for the current situation. Order. Order in the chamber. High Counselor Zephyr of Infinite Wisdom struck the resonance platform with increasing desperation as representatives from 47 civilizations continued their cacophonous debate. Translation matrices overloaded trying to process simultaneous arguments in dozens of languages, creating a feedback loop that sounded like the universe having an argument with itself. Cadet Chen sat in the witness chair at the center of the circular chamber, apparently unbothered by the chaos surrounding her. She had spent the last 3 hours answering increasingly frantic questions, with the same matter-of-fact tone she might use to discuss weather patterns. "The chair recognizes the representative from the Methane Coalition," Zephyr announced desperately. Ambassador Bubble of Ancient Sorrows rose from his atmospheric containment unit, his gaseous form shifting through agitated patterns. "This entire proceeding is absurd. We demand immediate quarantine protocols for the Sol system until proper containment procedures can be established." "Quarantine?" Chen asked with mild interest. "That seems a bit extreme. We're not carrying any diseases that would affect your physiology." "You are the disease!" shrieked Representative Crystal Song of Mourning from the Silicon Collective. "Your entire species represents a fundamental violation of biological principles." "Well, that's rude," Chen observed. High Counselor Zephyr felt the particular exhaustion that came from trying to maintain parliamentary order during what appeared to be the collapse of scientific understanding. "Cadet Chen, please help the Council understand. How is it possible that your species developed advanced civilization on a world that every theoretical model indicates should be uninhabitable?" "I'm not sure what you mean by developed," Chen replied thoughtfully. "We've always been there. Humans evolved on Earth over several million years, same as any other species evolves on their home world. But the atmospheric composition," Professor Vexithera began from the expert witness section, "is what we evolved to breathe," Chen finished. "I mean, that's kind of how evolution works, right? Life adapts to environmental conditions." The crystalline representative began emitting high-frequency vibrations that the translation matrix rendered as sounds of distress. "She speaks as if planetary. Adaptation is normal." "Isn't it?" Chen asked genuinely. "I mean, you're all adapted to your respective environments. We're adapted to ours. Seems pretty straightforward." Ambassador Tendril Seeks Light from the Photosynthetic Confederacy swayed forward in what appeared to be agitation. "But your environment is demonstrably hostile to life. The radiation levels alone." are what life on Earth adapted to handle, Chen interrupted gently. Our ozone layer filters most of the harmful radiation, our magnetic field deflects solar particles, and our cellular repair mechanisms handle whatever gets through. Cellular repair mechanisms? Dr. Helixandros asked from his position at the medical advisory station. Sure. DNA damage from background radiation is constantly being repaired by specialized enzymes. Every species must have something similar, otherwise you'd never maintain genetic stability. The chamber fell into the kind of silence that suggested several hundred highly intelligent beings were simultaneously reconsidering everything they thought they knew about biology. Cadet Chen, High Counselor Zephyr said carefully, are you suggesting that adaptation to extreme environments is common among species from your world? Well, yeah, humans aren't even the most extreme. Arctic terns migrate from pole to pole annually. Tardigrades can survive in vacuum, and some bacteria thrive in boiling acid. Extremophile adaptation is pretty standard evolutionary strategy. Representative quantum uncertainty from the probability states began cycling through mathematical configurations that indicated severe computational distress. This implies that our classification systems for habitability are fundamentally flawed. Maybe your classifications are just narrow? Chen suggested diplomatically. Narrow? Ambassador Bubble of Ancient Sorrows' form had shifted to a deep purple that indicated philosophical crisis. Our habitability parameters are based on comprehensive analysis of 847 civilized worlds. Right, but you said earlier that you've been avoiding our system for centuries, so maybe your sample size was a bit limited? The implication hit the chamber like a collapsing star. If the galaxy's most comprehensive survey had missed an entire category of habitable worlds simply by avoiding systems that appeared too hostile. How many other systems have we classified as uninhabitable? High Counselor Zephyr asked, though her voice suggested she already feared the answer. Admiral Vortex of Strategic Concerns from the Military Assessment Division activated his display unit. Preliminary estimates suggest approximately 23,000 systems currently classified as too extreme for survey may require immediate reclassification. 23,000, Professor Vexithera repeated numbly. And that's just within our current survey range, the Admiral added helpfully. Chen raised her hand. If it helps, humans have already identified about 4,000 potentially habitable exoplanets using our telescope systems. We've been assuming most of them were probably occupied. You've been assuming we existed? Representative Crystal Song of Morning asked. Well, sure. Statistical probability suggests intelligent life should be fairly common. We figured the reason we hadn't heard from anyone was either because interstellar communication is more difficult than we thought, or because other civilizations were using technologies we hadn't developed yet. You developed technologies specifically to search for us, Ambassador Tendril Seekslight inquired. SETI, deep space monitoring, radio telescope arrays. We've been actively looking for signs of galactic civilization for over a century. High Counselor Zephyr felt the weight of administrative catastrophe settling around her like a bureaucratic event horizon. Let me understand this correctly. Your species has been actively attempting to contact galactic civilization, while galactic civilization has been actively avoiding your system for approximately 4 centuries. Sounds about right, Chen agreed. And during this period, your species developed space travel, interplanetary colonization, and experimental faster-than-light propulsion. Among other things, yeah. Other things? Quantum computing, nanotechnology, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, fusion power, the usual technological development stuff. Admiral Vortex of Strategic Concerns began emitting the low-frequency harmonics that indicated military personnel experiencing strategic recalculation. Cadet Chen, When you say usual technological development, are you comparing your species' progress to other civilizations? I'm not really familiar with other civilizations' development timelines, Chen admitted, but I figured most species would develop similar technologies around the same time they achieve interstellar travel capability. Most species require approximately 50,000 years to develop from primitive spaceflight to interstellar capability, the Admiral said carefully. Huh. We went from first powered flight to interplanetary colonies in about 150 years, though I guess we had some pretty strong motivational factors. Motivational factors? Resource scarcity, climate challenges, population pressure, that sort of thing. Competition drives innovation pretty effectively. The chamber had achieved the peculiar quiet that occurs when a large group of highly intelligent beings realize they have made a collective error of staggering proportions. High Counselor Zephyr looked around the assembly, then at the single human sitting calmly in the witness chair, apparently unaware that she represented the most significant challenge to galactic civilization's understanding of itself in recorded history. Motion to reclassify Sol 3 from uninhabitable Deathworld to occupied system requiring immediate diplomatic contact, she announced. Seconded, came voices from around the chamber. All in. Favor? The vote was unanimous, though several representatives appeared to be voting while experiencing what could only be described as existential shock. Motion carried. Emergency protocols for first contact will be implemented immediately. High Counselor Zephyr paused. Cadet Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Academic Council, I apologize for the oversight regarding your species' existence. No problem, Chen replied cheerfully. Happens to the best of us, though you might want to update your survey protocols. I bet there are lots of interesting civilizations out there that you've been missing. As the council session devolved into frantic discussions about reclassification procedures, emergency contact protocols, and the complete revision of xenobiological theory, Cadet Chen gathered her notes and headed toward the exit. She paused at the chamber doors and looked back at the chaos she had inadvertently triggered with a simple raised hand in a xenobiology lecture. Funny, she said to herself with a small smile. And they thought no cadet could survive Earth.